Hey, it's Sean from Crafted Elements, and in this video I'm going to be making a fun epoxy resin glow-in-the-dark drawing and writing board for my kids. And I'm going to be using some off-the-shelf magic resin, which is from Amazon. I'm going to be using a Technoglow glow-in-the-dark UV powder. In this case it's cotton candy for my daughter. And I'm going to be using one of our very cool, super flexible, super durable, wide format silicone molds. Now we've been selling these for the last couple of years. They come in a few different shapes and sizes. This particular one is an 18x9, but we have bigger ones, smaller ones, round ones. We've also got a line of polyethylene molds, and these have become super popular among makers, resin artists, and woodworkers. You can actually shop these molds at craftedelements.com. Click on the molds link at the top, or you can go directly to boardmolds.com, which will get you directly to that page. And you can see if one of these molds might work for you. Now, these molds are really cool because they are super flexible, but they are very, very smooth, very, very finished on the inside. All you need to do to prep them for epoxy is do a quick mold release spray. And this stuff is, 13, 14, 15 bucks a can on Amazon, and it'll get you a lot of projects. You should totally wear a mask when doing this. I'm not wearing it for the video for obvious reasons, but just a quick layer to coat the inside of the mold. And what that's going to do is it's going to increase the longevity of the mold by preventing sort of a mold tear out situation where the epoxy could, partially set epoxy could bond to the inside of the mold and create a tear out when you take the piece out. You don't have to use that spray. It's more or less an insurance policy against damaging your mold. So typically we're going to let that set for 10-15 minutes before doing this pour, but for the sake of this video, I don't want to have you wait for 10 or 15 minutes while that dries. So I'm going to go on to the epoxy resin portion. Now, again, I said I was using magic resin from Amazon. There are lots of different resins available. And in this case, I'm not making this pour very thick. It's only going to be a 1/4 inch, maybe up to 3/8 of an inch. So I can use a tabletop resin like this. You can also use a casting resin, epoxy, crystal resin. There's a lot of different resin companies. So I've got this particular resin is a tabletop and art resin, and it's a 1-to-1 ratio. I've already poured my hardener into my mixing bucket, and I've got 500 milliliters, approximately 17 ounces. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same. Put another 500 milliliters to match in this 1-to-1 ratio. You always use the hardener first, which comes out very, very easily. It's much thinner. The epoxy A part is much, much thicker, as you can see. You can certainly get glow-in-the-dark writing boards cheaper, made in China on Amazon, but they're not going to be this size, they're not going to be as cool, and they're not going to be handmade. But these molds in this video definitely applies to other resin art, ocean art, and other types of resin art that you may do, including wooden resin. You can certainly put wood in these molds and make charcuterie boards and things like that. Almost there at 1,000 milliliters, which is roughly 34 ounces. All right, so now we're going to do a gentle mix, and typically you're going to mix this resin for 2 to 3 minutes. And you're going to want to do it slowly, obviously not to spill over the side of your container, but mostly to avoid getting bubbles in the resin. If you're using a casting resin, it's typically thinner and you won't get as many bubbles, but with these tabletop and art resins, which are super thick, you're going to get a lot of bubbles if you introduce a lot of air into this. Those bubbles will come out typically after being set in your mold with a use of a torch or a heat gun. But we certainly don't want to have to do that if we don't want to. And in this case, it's kind of a fun kids project. So if there's some bubbles, almost micro bubbles rather, in it, no one's going to notice and no one's going to care. All right, now it's time to mix in our pigment. We've got the Technoglow cotton candy glow-in-the-dark pigment, and this is a very, very fine pigment, which is going to mix really, really well. I'm roughly going to use half this bag. I'm going to mix it in slowly so it doesn't all bunch up. This stuff is pretty cool because once you expose it to like a light pen, it glows for quite a while, so the kids are going to love it. And then you're just gonna keep mixing and make sure it's very thoroughly mixed, because the last thing you want is patches of pigment in your epoxy. You wanna have a pretty uniform epoxy by the time you're ready to pour. All right, now ready to pour the resin once the epoxy and pigment have been fully mixed. And we're just gonna do that like so. This resin's going to self-level and be the same uniform thickness across the mold, as long as your tabletop, of course, is level. Now, resin and pigment is not cheap, so we want to get all that resin out if we're going to use it. Now you'll see that there's the bubbles coming out of the resin. A lot of these bigger ones will pop by themselves, but we're also going to use a torch. You can use a torch or a heat gun, and as you can see, as you go over this, all those bubbles just sort of pop away, leaving a nice smooth surface like glass. And you're going to need to do this a few different times, to be honest, over the next couple of hours. So this is not really something you want to just pour then leave for the day, otherwise your final piece is going to have bubbles in it. All right, well that's it for this part of the job. Like I said, over the next couple of hours we'll go over with the torch again to get all the bubbles out. But this resin is going to set in 24 to 30 hours. We're going to come back, going to demold this, which you're going to see how ridiculously easy that is with these silicone molds. A quick finish, and then it'll be ready to play with. A day has passed, our resin is set, and it's time to demold. I'm going to show you just how easy it is with these molds. Watch this, we just peel it back, and there you go. You're left with a perfectly clean mold, and there is our piece. Now you'll see the part that was poured in the bottom is a really nice small radius, pretty smooth, but the top, because of the meniscus of the resin, you know, it's rised up along the sides a bit, so we're just going to want to quickly run this through the router and chamfer these edges just so it takes the sharpness out of them. Just by pulling it out, I had a little paper cut and resin cut, I guess you could call it, just by handling this. So we're going to want to take this edge down, and then it'll be ready to play with. Turn your light pen on. We have many common shapes and sizes used by makers just like you available. To get a complete list and to order your own molds, simply visit craftedelements.com and click on the molds link at the top. I hope you enjoyed this video and can see how beneficial these molds can be. Make sure you follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Crafted Elements Co. to stay up to date on all of our new product releases. Happy making!